Hello and welcome to ETI-NET's webinar on cybersecurity advancements to HPE NonStop backup and storage management. I'm Richard Buckle and I'll be moderating this session today and with our special guests from HPE, DCIG. And as a background information, I see that there's people here from pretty much around the globe. May interest you that with the technology today, I'm coming to you from somewhere in the Tasman Ocean, about a latitude of 32, 33 degrees. And it's a surprise to me how much we've advanced in the last couple of years with this regard. And I'm coming to you too from an experience on non-stop systems that dates back to tandem computers, with time spent at NetLink, In Session, ACI, Golden Gate, etc. And where I was for a period of time the chairman of the non-stop community's ITAG organization. But this was all instances of where I was associated with data and where data was central to the products I was involved in, whether it was in a database or it was transmitting data, etc. So this webinar today is a joint production between ETI and HPE, and really it does represent a continuation of conversations on digital resilience that took place at this year's TBC event. As such, it is only natural for ETI to provide an update on cybersecurity and their take on how best to address potential attacks by bad actors. I think this is a very timely webinar for us all. But first, I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar with this specific focus. And for the next 45 minutes, we'll be covering the enhancements that ETI-NET together with HPE have made to protect NonStop in this latest release of BackBox with QoreStor, which is the focus of this presentation, and how these enhancements can help NonStop customers, from my perspective, protect their backup data and restore NonStop systems from, any cybersecurity impact that may take place. So with that, let's take a look at the logistics of today. First, note that this is a recorded session, and we will publish shortly after the end of the webinar. If you need to drop or want us to see, you can direct them to ETI-NET website under the company resources page. And secondly, in part because of the recording, it's important to understand, and I think everyone recognizes this, that we mute you all from an audio and we disable the video to minimize background noise and, yes, save bandwidth. The third thing is, since the audio is muted, we do encourage the use of the emojis through the course of the webinar. This will help presenters to see your thoughts and potentially, have the chance to adjust the discussion. The fourth, the questions can be submitted. I will be monitoring the chat session. So if you've got a question you may want to ask, you can submit at any time through the chat button, and we'll be holding questions for breakpoints that have been inserted into this presentation. So we will get round to the questions. So now let's get started by reviewing the agenda and introducing our presenters. Leading off this webinar today is Mike Mitch, the Director of Business Development for ETI-NET. He comes to ETI-NET with a great deal of experience with fault-tolerant and high-performance backup systems. And today he will be providing highlights on this latest release of BackBox with QoreStor. And we have a special guest, which I'm welcoming, and Jerome Vent has joined us today. Jerome is the Principal Data Protection Analyst with the Data Center Intelligence Group. And he joins us as a storage industry software expert, and he's got extensive history in comparing storage software. He's particularly well positioned to discuss the latest advancements in storage software. And yes, he has published multiple competitive comparisons regarding the competitiveness of QoreStor. So he's going to be worth listening to. I'm looking forward to that. And last but not least is Isaac Deeb of HPE's Global Managed Services. Isaac and I have been working together and together with Mike and others in the ETI team to deliver higher levels of data protection, for non-stop clients by acting as the independent third party Similar in concept to multi-factor authentication, where HPE delivers another level of immutability, and expanding the traditional 3-2-1 rule, which we're going to hear a little bit more about in these presentations, the webinar. And yes, we have NonStop product manager Ozan on this webinar as well. And with that, I think I will pass over to Mike to kick this off at the level I think everyone's looking forward to. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Richard. Now that we've gone through the introductions, let's recap the webinar objectives and the agenda. For the attendees, we've structured this webinar to provide an education on the latest state of the cybersecurity threat vectors and to present the enhancements that ETI-NET and HPE have made to restoring non-SOP systems from cybersecurity impact. We'll cover the HPE Digital Resiliency Framework and how ETI-NET is aligned with HPE's framework. We'll go in to cover the resilience architecture and include how HPE managed services for non-stop systems provide best practice consulting and implementation of cybersecurity controls. And then move on to specific resiliency functionality enabled through the QoreStor integration with BackBox. We've set time aside for 2 question and answer breaks and ask that you submit your questions, as Richard had requested, through the Zoom chat. Now let's look at the state of the cybersecurity breaches from Verizon. I've used the Verizon report for the last 7 years to gain a really good understanding of what's taking place in the industry regarding cybersecurity attacks. With the 15th release, which was for 2022, in the data breach report, nearly 24,000 security incidents globally across 21 industries were analyzed. It's no surprise that many of the top industries targeted overlap substantially with the non-stop market. Of the key findings, the reduction trend in social engineering, basic web attacks, miscellaneous errors, and privilege misuse, Verizon attributes to increased employee cyber education. However, the dramatic increase in system intrusion, where bad actors are intentionally entering various systems to cause an array of attacks, which ransomware is only one, is particularly alarming. It's not surprising that once the client's environment has been breached, Verizon found that the criminals first target the firm's ability to restore from a backup and therefore strongly suggest to have multiple copies of the backup data utilizing various levels of immutability as a best practice. As we go through in this webinar, we'll drill into the definitions and the various ways immutability is implemented. As such, a robust non-stop backup and storage solution is paramount. Years ago, ETI-NET's team envisioned a roadmap to enhance BackBox to deliver the backup data security functionality enhancements the non-stop industry demands. Let's take a look at how we align with the HPE Digital Resiliency Framework. As presented at the TBC 23, HPE's Digital Resiliency Framework is based on the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, Cybersecurity Framework. This framework identifies the 5 core pillars for a successful and holistic cybersecurity protection program. The 5 pillars being identification, protection, detection, respond, and recovery. Together, these pillars aid organizations in easily expressing their management of cybersecurity risk at a high level and enabling risk management decisions. Now let's look at the specific areas where ETI-NET helps organizations realize this vision. The identity function assists in developing an organizational understanding to manage cybersecurity risk to systems, people, assets, data, and capabilities. Relative to the data component, the BackBox and QoreStor solution play a key part in this function by not only storing backup data, but by helping to identify the backup location and the resiliency level, which is very important to understand in the event of a cybersecurity breach impact, where the data is that is still clean. This location and access, in combination with cybersecurity policies, helps identify asset vulnerabilities, providing the NonStop operations team critical information needed in order to make decisions on the integrity of the backup data. The protection function identifies appropriate safeguards that ensure delivery of critical infrastructure services. The BackBox with QoreStor solution plays another key part in this next pillar in the resiliency framework by providing several key features. First is the ability to back up unstructured files, NScribe and OSS files, and SQL DBs with the new system build snapshot backup and protect the system image routinely for recovery of NonStop systems after a technology failure or a cyber attack. Secondarily, the integration with QoreStor allows backup data to be encrypted before leaving the VTC to cloud tiers or to existing storage hardware within the organizations. This integration also provides the ability to implement immutability at several levels, which we'll explore farther in the presentation, which the X references that we have worked with HP to start to define. And we will discuss that in detail in the following slides. As mentioned, in the ability of BackBox and QoreStor to migrate data from lower protection platforms to higher levels by using BackBox console, also to migrate the data and to control its placement. While ETI-NET does not directly participate in the detect or the respond pillars of the framework, it's important to understand the functions these pillars perform to optimally select and appropriately recover approach, where detect defines the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. Respond covers the activities to contain the impact of the event. Depending upon the outcome of the detection pillar, the response includes what is considered a forensics exercise. This forensics exercise uses monitoring solutions which are available in the HP NonStop software portfolio to identify events within the NonStop system, to identify malware insertion points, providing the response team the valuable data insight into how far back and the type of data required to restore NonStop systems. These steps in the process are where managed services and other tools in the HPE NonStop ecosystem help to create an environment that builds the best resiliency for each customer's specific RTO, recovery time objective, and RPO, recovery point requirement, ranging from transparent failover to complete system restoration. The recover function identifies appropriately resiliency and restoration capabilities or services that were impaired due to cybersecurity incident. Once identified, BackBox and QoreStor provides the ability to recover the backup data volumes at various levels, and now with standalone load, the ability to restore the $ system image without an operational NonStop. To summarize, ETI-NET works with HPE to provide NonStop restoration across various forms of backup data. Now let's look at how HPE and ETI-NET are aligned on best practices for data protection and working to advance the solution in terms of immutability. As a storage and data protection company, HPE and ETI-NET are aligned on storage best practices using the 321-1 rule, where the -1 is new and represents immutability and can be implemented through various ways such as air gapping, firmware settings within the storage device, online or offline storage, as well as third-party contractual control of the settings. Let's take a deeper look into how the different levels of immutability are defined and to meet compliance and risk tolerance levels, how they can be used to protect NonStop organizations. Let's apply the previous chart to the NonStop by confirming the basics of the 3-2-1 rule with 3 copies of backup data, all of which are controlled by the NonStop customer. The first 2 copies meet the requirement to have an extra copy of the backup at the primary location on different media, which addresses storage media failure, and a 3rd copy offsite for disaster. When the original 3-2-1 rule was conceived in 2009 by photographer Peter Crowell, natural disasters were only accounted for. As such, immutability was not considered in the original definition. However, as we've seen, the -1 extends the definition to include immutability, which can be implemented in various ways. In working with HPE's NonStop team, ETI-NET's 3-2-1 with extension lays the groundwork to take into consideration the different ways to implement immutability by considering air gapping, connectivity, and control. On storage systems and services such as storage appliances that utilize firmware-based immutability settings, tape settings that hold cartridges in slot which are online, and cloud storage service providers that electronically implement immutability, these rules fall under the -1 definition. This can be extended to a -2 with offline storage, utilizing a true air gap of backup data on a tape cartridge or on another device, which is held by a 3rd party under the customer's contract control. And ultimately, by implementing a managed service to extend the resiliency further, ensures that the data is protected, accessible for forensics purposes, and can be validated for optimal NonStop system operation restoration. Having HPE or a 3rd-party managed service storing a 4th copy of the data that is offline, air-gapped, and separately controlled with NonStop expertise and contractual agreements creates another option for organizations to quickly implement enhanced backup resiliency and agility. Let's look at an example, resilient architecture, many of which have been recently implemented with QoreStor and BackBox by HPE. First, we have the NonStop landscape, which is redundant in nature with a DR location. Second, we have the first and second copy, which includes the redundant VTCs for continuous connectivity across NonStop nodes and internal QoreStor backup storage. This backup storage is extremely important because it encrypts and deduplicates NonStop backup data before being sent outside of the VTCs. Additionally, the data is encrypted in transit between the QoreStor VTCs, providing the second copy which can be read by the other VTCs. This allows the VTC to serve 2 key roles, serving as an active-active fault-tolerant connectivity to backup data for the NonStop, and as the second storage copy. For the offsite data through cloud tiering, QoreStor creates another replica of the deduplicated data, reducing network bandwidth and providing encryption in transit. This allows the organization to utilize a variety of offsite storage options, including existing storage, cloud service providers, and with Isaac here, we'd like to talk about the HPE managed service option. In the event of HPE managed services, a 4th copy or snapshot of the data is moved to a completely different offline storage system, meeting the client's resiliency requirements and further reducing the attack surface. So this is a good segue for Isaac to talk a little bit about how we've been working together to implement HPE managed services to get to that higher level of a resiliency. Isaac?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think just to cover just a little bit about our managed service for anyone who's not familiar. So we have a global team of system administration folks and system operations folks who monitor, operate, and administer customer systems. And as part of this program, as part of what we're talking about today, we have an opportunity to be able to not only store encrypted data, but also to recover it and restore it onto either a standby system or send it to somewhere where there is another system, or work with customers in order to restore that data. So holding that offline copy in one of our own data centers becomes that fourth tier that Mike just talked about. So this way, this whole thing, we can also take care of it fully and deliver it pretty much as a service as well. So for customers where we're already operating their equipment or are involved in some way in their operation, we can perform the entire operation end to end, or we can work as part of the process itself as a partner. And also, you know, we follow all the security and compliance regulations for whatever industry is related to each of our customers, and also we offer full transparency and reporting and metrics that goes along with all of that as to what's going on. And so this really makes it easy. These type of options make it really easy in order to deploy some of this. So just to recap, everything from a complete recovery solution, so that includes a backup or standby system, or just the data itself. For example, we would deploy something like a storage array like Store Once, make that available to customers and hold the data on their behalf.
That's great. Thank you so much, Isaac. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is that from a contractual standpoint, because of data privacy and the requirements for different compliance areas, HPE, your managed service team, has developed the contractual and the procedural processes that allow you to ensure that that data privacy is maintained, and that any data that you hold is able to meet the compliance standards required from anybody globally, essentially. Is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah, that's the right way to look at it. And also it's important to note that when we're talking about this type of resiliency solution, the data, the objects are encrypted. We would never hold the encryption key, so we'd never be able to access it. On top of our own procedures and policies would not allow us to access the data itself. We treat them as objects. Obviously, they're backups. They would only ever be used for the purpose of a restoration, for which we follow strict guidelines and procedures around security. And this is something we agree with on a customized basis to suit every individual type of situation.
That's great. And you bring up a really good point about the encryption keys. And that's something that we're going to be holding a different webinar about, because there are multiple ways to handle that. The good news is that in working with QoreStor, the ability to go ahead and control those encryption keys, and then under what circumstances to be able to pass them to HPE to ensure that data protection and what's taking place. All of that technology is in place. So we'll hold that for a separate webinar moving forward. But thank you for that. I think that's a good segue right now for Richard to see if we've got any questions that have come up.
This group's being a little quiet, Mike, but in listening to you, if I can, I was just briefly reminded of what Kirk Bresnik has said at TBC 23 this year, from moving from where the freshest data is created on NonStop to where the cleanest data can be found on NonStop. And your reference to clean really struck me, meaning that, leaving the NonStop to support other processes in the enterprise, NonStop data is clean. Yeah, therefore protecting that data to ensure it's remaining clean is the priority for all engaged with NonStop. And the question then that comes through it, so I'm really interested in BackBox from what you're saying, and I'm really interested in the BackBox and QoreStor, and I'm really interested in 4.11 release. But how do I know I've got the right levels of hardware, ProLiant models, etc., and the right levels of the software, etc.? Do I have to change anything, or can I just go straight up to 4.11?
That's good question. So the first thing is on the cleansing, or to make sure that you've got the right. I think it was it's a two-part question, right? How do you know when you're going to do use the platform to do a restoration, and at what level of restoration are you going to do? I want to go back to that NIST model and the identification and the forensics area. That's an area where the organization understanding what tools are in place for recording events and to look at certain things to be able to identify where is that, as well as the right policies that whenever there's a system change, whenever there are core architectural changes that, the company is following best practice to back up and create that snapshot image of the $ system piece. And that was number one. Number two on your question was to be able to identify the correct configuration areas. So we're going to be releasing at the end of this, we'll have a Q&A that is right now in final review. And in that Q&A, it'll detail all the specifics. I didn't want to put that all into a slide. Obviously, there's various levels of the NonStop as well as the QoreStor and the platform that's needed to be discussed. So we'll catch up on that piece after in terms of the Q&A that we can send out as part of our Q&A document. Okay, anything else that might have popped up?
Mark. No, that's it for now, Mike. I'm still watching the chat.
All right, no worries. All right, so let's just recap. So since the introduction of BackBox nearly a decade ago, right, the ETI-NET team's continued enhancements. The ability to expand nodes provides the ability to increase NonStop system performance, which is really important for whether it be ingesting data or it be to repopulate data. Additionally, it provides the node fault tolerance. And with the disaster recovery capability, the ability to go ahead and support multi-node geographically bidirectional synchronization. So this ability, right, to make a copy of another example is another example of another example is the tape catalog synchronization option, right, which enhances the disaster recovery that can be synchronized and then can also be replicated between the environments. With the introduction of QoreStor, ETI-NET, ETI-NET demonstrated our commitment to add value to the NonStop software platforms. The QoreStor integration delivered a highly complementary data management solution to address a lot of emerging compliance standards, such as the European Union's DORA and best practice data protection, as we've talked about with the 3-2-1 rule. Combined as an HPE supported solution with ProLiant, appropriate service and support, right? That integration allows organizations to gain more value by saving resources and improving HPE's ability to support the environment, to meet and exceed compliance requirements, allowing NonStop clients to realize new levels of data protection and agility. Some of the challenges that I've heard from NonStop, backup data is stored on shared storage systems. And in some of these areas where it's placed outside of the VTC, things such as SMB tagging and assuming that there may be a breach, a data breach, where somebody or a sister, an intrusion breach, they're looking for things inside of the environment. So the ability of the system to contain data and encrypt data as fast as possible is extremely important. So that capability is, available through the QoreStor integration, and that helps us in a number of different areas. But I wanted to bring Jerome in to talk about the state of the storage backup software market, because it's evolved very rapidly in this area. It's not just NonStop system backups that are targeted, right? The whole industry has this issue that's in place. So I'm going to go forward and then introduce it and hand it off to Jerome. Jerome, you want to pick it up from here?
Yeah. Yes, Mike. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, nice, loud and clear.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to this. And again, welcome everyone who's joined in. So yeah, as Mike said, I've been, as DCIG and myself specifically, I've actually been covering backup targets literally for decades. I actually worked with one of the original backup, many may be familiar with Data Domain and when Dell bought them or EMC bought them back in the day. I actually worked on serial number 001. So I've been around the space a long time. And since I've started DCIG, we've been covering backup targets, both physical and software defined, for years. And really, when I started looking at like software defined secondary storage systems, this is really a nascent space. There's not necessarily a lot of products on the market, maybe 10 to 15 providers who offer products. but it's actually, that's more than even a few years ago. There's enough products now available that DCIG is actually looking to do a more formal report on this, just sort of comparing these different providers and different products. But among these on the market or that are available, you may wonder, well, why of all the available products did ETI-NET choose QoreStor as their preferred solution? And really, of all those out there, QoreStor stands out for a number of reasons, mostly because it's even though the other ones have just come to market in the last few years, QoreStor has actually been around for a number of years. It actually came out in the early 2000s. Actually, it wasn't even called software defined then, but it's been available for a number of years. It's matured, and it's really its origins are in a software defined offering. And this is in contrast to its competitors, which often started out on their hardware solutions or on their appliances, and now they've taken the software and made it available as a software solution, but often it only runs either in their clouds or only on their hardware. So whereas QoreStor differentiated itself where because it came off of their hardware, it still carries a lot of their hardware dependent traits. QoreStor is developed very differently, so that makes it more flexible to use in these sort of environments where there may be different storage providers in the environment, as Mike illustrated just a few slides ago, or different cloud providers. So it really gives these configuration organizations a lot of flexibility to where they want to store their data. But just because it gives it's software defined, it doesn't necessarily mean it's you still want all the traits that you might see in a traditional backup appliance. And as Mike just showed here, it has all these advanced features that companies need from their from a deduplication or basically a backup target. And so let's talk about those, like specifically their cybersecurity features. Now, this really ties into the NIST framework, and it offers both. It offers the different types of encryption and the sort of immutability you need in this environment. And I think it's important to remember in today's world, so I've had some conversations where, if I have immutability, do I really need encryption? Or if I have encryption, do I really need immutability? And the short answer is yes, you need both of them, and really they're complementary technologies. And these are needed to address two different types of hackers or ransomware attacks. The encryption is needed is one of the increasingly popular attack vectors now, is that when ransomware gets inside an organization, or even hackers maybe they get into the organization as an administrator, they gain administrative privileges. You may have heard of this recent MGM attack. That's essentially what happened there at the MGM when they got inside their network there. They get administrative privileges, they get in, and if data is not encrypted, and this includes backup data that's not encrypted, they can actually go out, they can copy that data, and then they'll actually copy that data outside your organization, and they may sell it on the web through some dark websites, or they may use that to extract a ransomware. In fact, that might be their only means of attack. You may not even know it's been copied, and then it's already out in the wild. You're like, well, how did it get there? This is how they do it. So by having it encrypted, it prevents the data from being read or understood and being manipulated. So it protects organizations that way. The other way is by offering immutability, which is the complementary. Well, you may think, well, if it's encrypted, why do I need immutability? Well, immutability is needed to actually prevent the data from, even if it is encrypted, a ransomware attack could even re-encrypt it again, so you can't read your encrypted data, or they can just potentially go out there and delete the encrypted data or damage it somehow, and basically make it unreadable to you. So by storing it in an immutable format, it gives organizations the ability to actually recover and retrieve the data and prevents anyone from destroying that data or compromising in any way. So it really ensures the recoverability of the data and preserves the data in such a way that it can't be copied or used outside the organization. So, and QoreStor does all that as part of the features. These are sort of some of the features that organizations look for. Deduplication, it's not necessarily differentiating in a specific way, other than it does everything. All the performance tests I've seen, all the ratios I've seen as far as its capabilities are equivalent with all the other, most of the other leading solutions in the marketplace. So you still get that sort of storage savings, that compression and deduplication that you're expecting from one of these backup target appliances. And the performance optimization is also what it does, and it impacts organizations in two ways. Because QoreStor is hardware independent, by hardware independent is independent both of server and storage. So that gives ETI-NET the flexibility to bring into this environment, host it on the ProLiant servers, and as organizations, as ETI-NET, as you look at upgrade paths and whatnot, the QoreStor can actually run on the newer generation. So if you don't necessarily have to upgrade all your backend storage. You can just upgrade the server, get more processing power, and actually improve backup throughput just by upgrading your hardware without having to buy a whole new appliance. This also, QoreStor also helps you on the restore and recoveries, because what's unique about QoreStor is the fact that even though it stores data in a duplicated format, when it comes time to do restores or recoveries, it actually provides the same performance as if you did not deduplicate the data at all. Now, I'm not really aware of any other provider in the market that is making that sort of claim, where you can get the same performance whether you store it in the duplicated state or a non-deduplicated state. So that makes it very effective. So when you start talking about restore times and times to recover, QoreStor really running this underneath the covers really positions organizations really well for this performance optimization. But here's what I think is really, and all those features are great. Okay, I mean, having all this and having dedupe and encryption and immutability and great performance and hardware flexibility, all these are great. But one of the difficulties with, whether it's QoreStor or any of these, competitive deduplication appliances or backup targets, is that they actually become reasonably complex to manage and you're going to use, because of the environment it's in, you will be using all these features. And you're going to have to do the upgrades. You're going to have to do the software licensing if you're managing this outside of ETI-NET. And then you still have to manage the backups and their placement, their underlying backup infrastructure. And what's really appealing about this solution is ETI-NET has actually, I've learned that it's really taken time to really actually integrate all this so it can actually manage it through the ETI-NET interface with BackBox, and then actually manage all the QoreStor's features through that. So whether you're a NonStop or storage operation team as an administrator in that environment, you can actually manage QoreStor as part of, just set up policies, and then it will then manage the QoreStor and all these features on the back end, basically programmatically, without you having necessarily get familiar with all the underlying infrastructure and features of QoreStor specifically. So you really get all the power of QoreStor without having to become proficient in QoreStor and the infrastructure itself. You get all that just as being familiar with this BackBox integration. So, Mike, I know we've talked a lot about this. Maybe you can comment a little bit more on some of the integrations that you see, and even some of the features we're going to talk about here, how you're leveraging some of that functionality.
No, thank you, Jerome. Absolutely. I mean, the clients that I've had the opportunity to talk to, many of which are very, very large organizations. And when you're talking to the NonStop operators, it's very, they get very passionate about saying, I can see the storage. I can control the storage. I'm getting this level of deduplication out of it. I'm getting this level of performance out of it. Because a lot of times in the traditional sense, where you're using an external storage device outside of the BackBox that is not part of the first two copies, right? Remember, the first two backup copies are the most important, but you're sharing that with someone else. That puts a lot of pressure on the administrator because they don't have control of it, yet they're being held for service level agreements and backups and things like that. We've heard of situations where the other storage, the external storage that's running over the internal network, but it's again a secondary storage device. It's doing global deduplication on Saturday nights, and the backup performance of the NonStop jobs is slowing down substantially, right? And the alerts are going off in the monitoring system, right? The EMS logs. So being able to have control of the first two copies, being able to get them encrypted immediately, and then being able to leverage the rest of the storage is something that I've heard, when I've spoken to NonStop operators that have deployed this, they get really excited about. It's something that gives them control, and they can go back to their management and they can feel more confident in being able to say, hey, I've got control of the data at this levels. If you still want to use the other storage, that's great. But at least I've got control now that I never had before to allow me to be able to get the data backed up faster, right? And to be able to have control on what the deduplication and what the immutability levels are. So thanks, Jerome, for jumping in on this part of it. I know that you've done a lot of work in looking at software-defined storage areas and comparing it to the appliance areas. And the part that really intrigued me with ETI-NET was the ability to integrate QoreStor so that the NonStop operator doesn't have to become a data domain administrator, right? We've done it in such a way that we make it very easy for them to be able to administer the storage and still get the same benefits of it and the security aspects that we outlined. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here and kind of just recap the 4.11 release, which we announced last month officially, which, that expanded the backup and recovery functionality of NonStop systems to include the customer-specific $system NonStop image. This is really important because it is a form of a snapshot of the core system environment. And as many of you know, in the NonStop arena, snapshot capability originated primarily from either just pure storage arrays or virtualization layers. Putting NonStops into VMs in that architecture still got a long way to go. So being able to snapshot it from that standpoint doesn't exist, but you still have to have the bare metal ability to go ahead and restore a NonStop system. And this functionality allows that to happen to make sure that you can go back to any level in terms of to meet compliance standards and security standards, right? So it provides the ability to store that NonStop image in compliance, right, with the backup data protection standards, right? So now what you're doing is you're aligning the NonStop system image with the same protection standards that you have for the rest of the NonStop systems. And then you can restore it when you need to, knowing what level of resiliency it's been stored, right? That's going to come back to the NIST model. Where is my data located? What level of resiliency? How far back? Forensics experts tell me that, and we can give you that and get that piece back. So that was a big part. So the system build snapshots, the first part. The second thing is the ability to take a standalone load of that system image from a non-operational NonStop and to bring that back up. The ability to do that was really, really important. The data migration was a new feature that we added, which allows the BackBox to modernize the protection of backup data from within the environment. So much like you've heard, there's going to be environments where you have backup data that's going to be sitting on other storage devices. In the event that you want to get it encrypted and you want to bring that control of that encryption and that deduplication back into the two copies and to get it protected by QoreStor, we've created a way that allows you with the 4.11 release to be able to handle that ability to modernize the data protection right from legacy data stores. This functionality, also assists with storage technology refresh, as well as a service provider migration that may take place, right? It provides real-time status of the data backup migration. And with QoreStor, it provides NonStop operations direct allocation and control of that media resource and the replication. And then the last feature that we added in the 4.11 release was the automatic scratch, which provides the option to automatically provision scratch volumes to reduce manual effort and to enhance availability of backup service delivery. It's a new option to automatically expand that scratch volume, provision of the volume, and the storage media to update the NonStop catalog. And that's done without the manual intervention. Again, looking at taking our best practices that we've seen with NonStop operators, trying to help them to automate some of the processes so that things don't stop in the backup process to streamline it and increase the agility and the automation. Okay, so that's going to take us, we're getting close to the top of the hour, but what's really important here is, and we asked Ozen to join us. Ozen is our sponsor, our champion within HPE in the HPE NonStop business unit. And we wanted to I wanted to thank him for joining and let him have an opportunity to talk about our partnership. Ozen? Okay, I might need to unmute him. Can you unmute Thu? Can you unmute Ozen? But in the interim, while we're trying to do that, the relationship with HPE and ETI-NET go back decades, right? Both companies have worked extensively together with the BackBox unit as a backup target. And through the partnership, right, which is driven by the NonStop EU team, we've embarked on a number of areas, including technology development. Specific case in point, is the steps and the processes to be able to back up the $ system image, as well as other capabilities within the NonStop environment to make sure that we're protecting the data. And we're going to continue to do that as we move forward to make things faster and to protect the environment using best practices. Also, on a solution basis, we work as much as we can with all of the solution ecosystem partners. Right, HPE's put in place the solution catalog, and then with the solution catalog, each partner plays a different role and works collaboratively together to bring that together on ensuring that we have that ecosystem strategy in place. From our viewpoint, as we bring in modernization technology, like what you heard from Jerome with QoreStor, we can help modernize architectures. We can help implement the best practices that are out in the industry to protect, as well as what's also really important is the GreenLake and HPE service programs. Right, as you heard from Isaac, in terms of already providing managed services for NonStop accounts, this the kind of capability that we're delivering allows that service to come through the existing channels sold by HP. And with the GreenLake program, to be able to actually deploy the solutions. And I know of several accounts over the last 6 months where NonStop refreshes have gone forward under a GreenLake program, including the BackBox and the QoreStor deployment in that area. So a lot of partnership benefits in that. And what we're going to do is go on to the next chart here. Just to this session will be recorded, so we encourage you to share it. And for the next couple of minutes, I think we've got the opportunity to go over some more question and answer. Richard, do you have any Q&A? Oh, let's see here. I see a couple one here.
Can you hear me?
There you go. Now I can hear you, Richard.
Yeah, the thing that came to us was when Jerome talked about software-defined secondary storage, I think we're becoming familiar with that. And when Isaac was talking about managed service, etc. But the big key question comes with the 321X model rule, etc. We're assuming that it's not just, daisy chaining a whole bunch of NonStop systems. We're looking at this from a costing point of view. Is this segueing into discussions NonStop community should be having with cloud service providers, even the open ones, in addition to conversations that they may be having with HPE?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I mean, I can't think of any CIO today that doesn't have cloud service provider, right? Some sort of a strategy in place. So, you've got to assume that every single, CIO in all these organizations, they have to have some sort of a cloud service provider strategy. Now, is it 100%? Is it 0%? I think that there's a lot of things, and that's one of the things in the managed service area that you can step your way through. There's benefits to cloud service providers like the OpEx model, and with the GreenLake, model, HPE delivers part of that. Is the cloud service provider knowledgeable in the NonStop arena? That's another discussion. I think you heard from Isaac in terms of that, deep awareness, understanding of what's required to do it. A lot of these cloud service providers, you deal with a portal and there's nobody on the other side, right? You're a click through. So, and you're liable for the way of that as opposed to them and the way those service contracts are written. So, I think that having the capability that we've put in place with the QoreStor platform to handle object data in terms of the backup, it is a stepping stone for the organizations to have a conversation of now, where do they want to put it, right? They have the ability to put it somewhere. and then also to handle the encryption keys in a way that is really, really important as you take into consideration, cloud service providers along those lines.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to that, the recovery, because storing the data is one thing, but then the recovery, how's that handled? And, if you look at ransomware, for example, you typically want the recovery to be done by a clean group, because you're at the point of attack, you're not sure how it happened. You can't really rely on anything. So it's good to think about a third party also being involved in the recovery, and that does require a fair bit of skills. And that's why I mentioned earlier about being involved in the recovery and also having a backup system, perhaps to put to have the recovery be done on. That's something to think about.
Great feedback, Isaac. Thanks for jumping in on that. I remember, when we had our first discussion, and thanks for getting us together on it. It was, I was looking for you. So, I can give you the tool, but I can't do the work. So, it's a different kind of mindset, but thanks for bringing that up, because you have to be able to have that skill on what is the environment and, what's going on from the industry standpoint and what people are doing on the forensics area. And in working with you and, your team, understanding that you have that capability and that's what you do day in, day out, specific to NonStop systems, that's priceless. And I'm really thankful to have you added as part of, the solution set and being able to go ahead and do that protection and the recovery aspect of it. Richard, we still got a couple more minutes before we got to call it. Anything? I saw some Q&A going on in the chat. Thank you, Benoit, for that.
I've got a question here. I have a quick question regarding that came to me from questions document that we'll probably have visible on the website at some point. But
Very
yeah,
good.
but again, reiterating what you said is that this presentation, this webinar has been recorded, and we will let everyone know when it's available on the website. And I think with that, I'll just hand back to Mike for any final comments, closing issues. But again, I want to thank everyone that participated. It's been a good session.
Thank you, Richard. So on behalf of ETI-NET, I want to thank all of the people that joined the call on the HPE side, as well as the customer environment space. I also want to thank Isaac for working with us behind the scenes here to put together a solution that is, I think, one of the best approaches and using the BackBox QoreStor solution as part of the tools to be able to protect data and to help get the response in place. Also, Jerome, thanks for jumping on and giving us the background.
Hello and welcome